Okay. Good morning, all. Good afternoon, all. In fact, we are meeting after the post noon. Today's agenda is few of you have joined late, but I want to mention it to all of you that your internal assessment quiz will be on 2nd May to 4th May for all the subjects. Each subject will have 30 questions, quiz questions carrying one mark. You are supposed to answer that within a span of 1 hour as per the schedule, which will be shared to you shortly. Second important thing is the portions for my subject, which is managing big data, will be the module 1 and module 2 and something related to Hadoop, right? The more of the questions will be related to Hadoop rather than the module 1 and module 2. There will be less weightage given on questions which is related to industrial applications, because I wanted to take that as a case study for the internal assessment test. But unfortunately, since we are in a unprecedented situation now where we are not able to meet and have a regular test, the case study based questions may not be possible in the internal assessment quiz. So for that, we will be focusing more on module 2 and module 3, right? The questions will majoritatively be around basics of Hadoop and things related to Hadoop, and as well as some of the questions related to NoSQL database and things like that, right? So this is as far as the quiz is concerned. As per their subject code, this quiz will be scheduled, and the schedule of it will be shared by the chief examination coordinator to me very soon, right? So coming back to our regular business of whatever that we were trying to do in the yesterday's class. So we were trying to do the Hadoop tools, right? So in the Hadoop tools, we had covered some basic related aspects with respect to HBase. We had stopped at a point where we were talking about the big picture of Hadoop systems, right? Let me just share my screen to you. Okay, I think this is the place that we had stopped at. Is my screen visible to all of you?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. Yeah. So the big picture is what we had stopped at in the yesterday's class, right? We had went through how HBase and Hadoop interacts in the layered fashion, and how other elements of this Hadoop tool will basically help you to maintain certain coordination between different elements of the Hadoop architecture. So if you talk about HBase master, right? Yesterday's class we had seen that the hierarchy or the architecture of HBase system would be something like this. You have a HBase master, H region server, right, and a H client, right? So these are the three elements that you will have basically in your system, right? So with respect to that, you can see that HBase master is a utility, right? It is basically a master of everything that we are trying to talk about in the HBase based application, where the role of this particular master is to assign regions to H region servers. The root regions locates all the metadata regions. The meta regions maps the number of user regions. It is as good as an allocation of a file system with respect to the primary hashes and the secondary hashes, which happens in the server, right? Which happens in a typical file system, right? So the assignment of these user regions, which basically the regions, whatever that we are trying to talk about, is a piece of the database, a horizontal piece of the database. It covers certain set of rows, right? So these are some of the important aspects of the user regions and H region server, which basically enables and disables the schema to change and monitor the health of each servers based on certain criteria. So let's say that if one of the servers which is connected to the master is not operational, right? The metadata of that particular meta region server, whatever that is there, will be transferred to another server for the effective usage. So there is no single point of failure that does the HBase basically allow, right? So this is architecture which is very similar to the architectures what we have seen for Hadoop master slave servers, right? We have seen name node and data node relationship. In a similar manner, you have a relationship in case of HBase also. So the next important thing here is when you talk about a root or a meta table, the size of the root of a meta table is around 1 KB, and the default size of the total table is around 256 MB. That is, one row is 1 MB. The default size what is allocated for such kind of tables is 256 MB, right? So one root table what we are trying to talk about is equal to 2 to the power of 18 meta regions, or 2 to the power of 18 into 2 to the power of 18 user regions, or in other words, it is 2 to the power of 54 KB, or it is 2 to the power of 64 bytes. These are the total size that is required for maintaining the HBase architecture. I hope that you are taking a snapshot of this particular screen, because this is also a very important calculations. So 2 to the power of 64 bytes is nothing but 2 to the power of 24 TB, right? That is the total number of size that we are trying to talk about. So when you are talking about a H region server basically has these set of requests or the services that it basically deals with. One is it writes request, it reads request, it clears or flushes the cache, it does something related to compaction, that is not exactly compression, better representation of data into the system. Then it has region splits. So these are the things that it basically deals with. So the HLog server, or the server where the write request basically happens, will also log in HLog, right? And all the data which are related with respect to this are stored in a format which is related to MapReduce map file 1.1, 1.2 in a memcache or in the HStore. So the data, whenever a read request basically happens, the distributed cache, which is your memcache, basically has the details of, or basically loads the details of the tables which are distributedly stored, and from there the data is extracted. So for this memcache to load the relevant rows or relevant columns of that particular table, it should basically fetch the details from HStore. HStore basically stores a snapshot of that particular table in the H region server. So the cache flushes are for clearing the log files and the intermediate files which are there, which are operated in a Hadoop based system, right? So that is the reason why cache flush is given in the H region server. See, the capacity of the region servers are more, but again, we cannot overload their memories and whatever is the memory related resources that is available, right? It has to be thoroughly flushed so that a new data is being brought into the system. So whatever that we are talking about memcache, which basically gets flushed during this particular period. So all the contact with the map file 1, map file 2 will be deleted in this particular case. So new data will be loaded by the HStore into the memcache. So the compaction is basically an aspect wherein which the data which is stored in map file 1, map file 2, and so on will be removed and will be stored as a single file. So you are trying to compact the data, you are trying to do a better representation of the data so that it fits in a certain region of the entire server. So that is the overall intention of having it. So the region splits are basically, again, you have a map file 1, you basically slice these files into different regions and submit it. So this is your typical architecture of a HBase client. So if you animatedly move across and see how the data basically flows from each other, you may see that you may see that the client basically makes a request to the master. The master basically contacts the root region. Client also contacts the root region. Then the meta regions which are there on the either side of this root region, these are the meta regions. This stores a meta information about the table. So the client interacts with the meta region, then the user region, then the information is cached into the client laptop or the client machine. So this is how the um, data gets flowing in a HBase kind of a system. This is just an example of 3 servers and a master, but in a real-time scenario, you will have many region servers, right? And then you have many clients accessing the information. So coming to another important tool, which is a Zookeeper. Now, Zookeeper is one topic which I had given you as an assignment, right? Just to explore. But if you find some other tool apart from Zookeeper where you can explore more, something like Apache's Ambari, which is the latest inclusion into MapReduce 2 as well as MapReduce 3, you can also extend your talk or the seminar session from Zookeeper to Ambari, right? So you have HBase servers which need certain coordination. So a Zookeeper is basically a tool in the Hadoop system which is used for coordination purpose. It coordinates the master with the region servers. It coordinates the master with the HDFS client, what is there at the bottom, right? So the major work of a HBase or a Zookeeper instance is to do management of HBase. That is the foremost thing that it basically does. It does basically the movement of data it monitors the movement of data from different servers. So when you are creating a table in HBase, it rather looks like this, right? HBase admin is the name of the class where you are supposed to use this particular class for creation of a table. So you are spawning a new instance of this, right? And then you are using HBase column descriptor. Please remember that your HBase database is a column family based database. You do not have the same hierarchical structure as what you have seen in case of your traditional RDBMS systems, right? So you first need to create column descriptors, right? Then you need to create the column families, right? For example, in our example, what we have seen information and roles to be 2 column families, right? The row key is something like persons table, right? So when you need more number of column families, you will have to create more number of instances of that which belongs to the column descriptor, right? So once when you have created an instance of a column descriptor, this column descriptor instance is like an array of objects. So it stores different family names. For example, the column 0 stores the column family 1, right? In this case, in our example, what we took earlier, it may be info as the name. Similarly, column of 1 stores the column family 2. So in our case, it is role, right? So likewise, you basically create the column families and add those descriptor to the H table descriptor, right? H table descriptor is being added in this. Now every descriptor adds this column family, whatever that you've created. So descriptor.add family is the name of the object which will add the column families, right? And finally, the admin, whatever that you have created at the top, you say admin.create table, it creates that particular HBase table. So this is the working of how a table is being created in a HBase kind of environment. Please remember that in a exploration what you did with MongoDB earlier, the way in which you created a table or way in which you created a JSON object was more or less the same way, right? You used an object for creating it. So all of the NoSQL kind of a database systems follows the philosophy of the object oriented rather than a SQL philosophy of using it in the command terminal, except Cassandra, which looks very similar to that of an SQL. The SQL which is used in Cassandra is similar to the SQL what you see. Apart from Cassandra, all the other databases what we discuss uses an object-oriented philosophy of creating and using it. So this is how the system basically works. So this is a overall view of how the logging operations basically happens. Every information that migrates from a client to a server, every details of work what is being created in the Hadoop system has to be cached, has to be logged, right? So these are the two important things which basically happens, right? The reason is because the once when a HBase or anything that you execute on a command line in Hadoop based system runs into several lines in a command prompt, the user or the programmer may not be able to track every instance of what is happening in the command line. It is better that you create log files to understand what is happening after a command is being executed and try to find out what is the error, if at all there is some error that comes in, right? So this is the reason why logging in operation is considered as a paramount importance in the Hadoop-based systems, and very importantly in clustered architectures. You cannot see their output in the command line, right? So the logging operations has an architecture something like this. At every level, there is a logging that is going to happen. The first level is the H region server where it creates the log. Then you have the H regions. Then you have the mem stores. At every level, whatever that happens is logged down to a special file called as HLog. All the synchronous and role writing and everything, whatever that happens with this log operations is casted, it is being recorded, it is being monitored at every place. So when you talk about HBase deployment, the deployment of HBase is something like this. It has to fit in our name node and data node architecture of the HDFS. So in a name node and a data node architecture, the name node basically houses the H master, which is the root of your HBase server. Then it also has job tracker and zookeeper, right? As I said earlier, first your cluster is to be installed, the Hadoop system is to be installed. After it is being installed, only you can install HBase. So when you install HBase, right, when the installation is successful, after that you type JPS command on the command prompt, you should be able to see 9 services in a Hadoop 2.0 system, starting from name node, secondary name node, job tracker, task tracker, then you have YAR resource manager, YAR node manager, then you have got HMaster, Zookeeper, and then you have to see JPS. These are the 9 services which should be running when you type JPS after you have successfully installed HBase onto it. Now, when you come to the lower part of your architecture, which is your data node, which is this the slave nodes of the HBase system, right? This particular part of the architecture houses the region servers, the data node, which is the name itself is the data node. Then you have task trackers, right? These are the lower part or the server part of the details which it is basically supposed to store. So you have already seen the create table example. You can see after it is being executed, the output looks something like this. You have a row key, timestamp, column family 1, column family 2. This will be a description structure, right? Even in your MySQL, when you type DESC, it basically shows the description of the table of how it looks like, right? In the similar fashion, you may also see that your your database table will look in the same fashion in case of HBase. So how do you do insertion operation in case of HBase? The insertion operation of the HBase is done in this particular way. You need to use a class called as batch update, right, and create an instance of the batch update. So there is a method called as put method. So this method is responsible for writing the records into the HBase table. So you are just adding the values into column family. You are writing the values into it. So there is no way that there is any other format that you basically do, right? So you use the put method and enter the value to it. So after you have entered, after you have used the put method, at the last line you may observe that there is a commit protocol or the commit function, which you are basically supposed to use after you finish the writing process. Now what this commit basically does, it does a two-phase commit protocol. It ensures eventual consistency, but at the same time it also ensures that the data is permanently written into persistent storage of that particular system. So when you compare MySQL and as well as HBase systems, the rows into 10 columns is equal to 1. That is the uh, function which is used for x-axis, and the y-axis is the time in milliseconds. So when you see that HBase has a linear increase over the number of rows with respect to time, right? But MySQL also has the same fashion, but it does have a lower performance when compared with the HBase. The insertion operation is on a lower end. So you know that any kind of a database system that you create, you must have a search functionality into it. So the search functionality is incorporated again with the code sequence. Select value from table where key is equal to so and so and label is equal to so and so is the query that you are supposed to execute for it. So once when you give a search kind of a query, it basically calls a class called a scanner class. Now this particular scanner class scans the columns. It does not scan the row key. You know that the database, the relational database systems abide by a property called as ACID properties. Now what are these ACID properties? The ACID properties are nothing but atomic, consistent, isolation, durability. Now, when you talk about atomic, the entire process of transaction is done or none is done, right? Consistency is the database is constrained to preserve values at every level to be the same. Isolation, it should make sure that the user, there is only one process that executes at that particular point of time. Two concurrent transaction will not see another transaction which is in flight. Durability is the updates that are made to the database are in a committed transaction and will be available for future transactions as well. So the effect of one process should not make the system to lose the value or should not drive the system to crash. You have already seen CAP theorem earlier, right? CAP theorem basically stands for consistency, availability, and partition tolerance. So every word what is there in the CAP theorem basically stands for its name, right? For example, consistency stands for the data to be same at everywhere. Availability stands for failure and response, right? Partition tolerance stands for having the system being partitioned into several different subsystems which are geographically located elsewhere. So you have seen Cassandra earlier, but this is again a visit to it, right? So we are just seeing it again. Why Cassandra? You have already come through all these details. I will not go much into it. The design goals of Cassandra is very important. It has high availability, eventual consistency, incremental scalability, optimistic replication, knobs, right? Low cost ownership, minimal administration. These are some of the design goals. So when was this came into picture? It was a combination of Google's Bigtable plus Amazon's Dynamo, right? Combined together became a Cassandra. So proven, Facebook stores 150 TB of data on 150 nodes. This was the statistics which was taken in 2012, right? And this is under the Web 2.0 consideration, where you see there are other important social networks like Twitter, Rackspace, Mahalo, Reddit, CloudCake, Cisco, Dig, SimplyGeo, Oyala, OpenX, and others, which are also a proven technology for Cassandra, right? They are all technologies which makes use of Cassandra at the beginning, right? Facebook later on moved from Cassandra to HBase in 2012, later part of it. So the original proposer of CAP theorem was Dr. Eric Brewer. He was the first person who proposed this. And it was subsequently proved by Gilbert and Lynch. So in a distributed systems, you can satisfy only 2 out of the 3 items in the CAP theorem. You cannot satisfy all the 3. So when you take Cassandra as a system, it is eventually consistent, available, and partition tolerant. That is, it's an AP tolerant database. If you talk about an RDBMS, it is a CA tolerant database, right? They don't use partition at all in RDBMS systems. So when you talk about a Cassandra's data model, it more or less looks like an SQL table itself, right? How an SQL table behaves, in the same way does a Cassandra data model also behave. You can see it is a column-oriented database. You can see it does not have any schema, fixed schema. You can see that it is get and put methods which are used for writing the operations. It often has heavy workloads. So the data model is something like this. So you have a key. From that particular key, you create a column family. Now, after you have created a column family with respect to that particular key, you can make the columns to be added or modified dynamically. Then that particular key can also be associated with another column family, and it can also have certain values under it. You can keep creating as many number of column families for a particular key. Right? For example, this is one column family called as rockets, where the key value is in integer. The value that is associated is in a column family. The column family has got name, tune, inventory, quantity, breaks, and so on. Right? So these are the ways in which the data can be stored. So it has got something called as optional super column, a name list. A super column contains a standard columns that stores a recent order. So in example, a food, Martian, animal, and all are super column names, right? They are defined above that particular row, right? Just to look as a normal RDBMS kind of a table, a super columns are created in case of Cassandra. Both the columns and the super columns have name and value into it. The key difference between a standard column value is a string, but in case of a super column, the value is map of columns. So the columns can be always stored by the names. The supporting types for them is byte type, UTF-8 type, lexical UUID type, time UUID type, ASCII type, long type. These are the types which are supported by the data model. And each of these columns, whatever that we talk about, can be stored in different data types. So when you talk about write operations in Cassandra, the write operations are done on a random request, and they are also done on a random nodes. The partition determines the nodes that are responsible for that particular data. There are local write operations that are logged and then applied into in-memory versions. The commit logs are stored in a dedicated disk local machine. So the write operations have client, commit log, mem table, flush, ss table. These are the architectural aspects of the write operations. So when a client basically does a write operation, it goes into the commit log, which is basically the disk. Then the disk issues an add value to mem table, which is basically a memory where the part of the table is stored, and then it flushes to all the ss table, right, where the actual tables are stored. So the other way of looking into this is you have keys of CF1, CF2, CF3. These are column family numbers, right? Then you issue it to a commit log. The commit log basically flushes this columns into different mem tables, which are nothing but your memory. Then this basically flushes the data into the disk, right? So this can also be a dedicated disk where the key numbers are the offsets, right? And which are basically the index, and you are able to see the data in the different way. So here what matters for a write operation is the data size that you are trying to write, the number of objects that you are committing in the memory, and then the lifetime of that particular data, whether that data is a transient data or the data is a persistent data which exists for a longer time. This is all what matters in case of the write operation with respect to the Cassandra write operations. So then you have compactions, which are basically nothing but if there are multiple files which are storing less than 25% of data, you compact them and store it as a single file. So this basically happens when there is a lot of shuffle and chart or a serialization, which basically happens. So these data get stored into multiple different files, and all of them are not completely full. Not even 50% of them are full. So in those cases, what happens? A merge sort is applied onto it, and all the data which is having different key values are sorted in an ascending order and merged into a single data file. And this particular details, whatever that is being sorted, the offset of every key values is loaded into memory, and index file is created for it, right? That is all the offsets, that is the key values starting from k1 to k30. These key values are loaded in an index file, and then there is a bloom filter. The bloom filter is the end of the offset. Then once when this merger is done, the intermittent files which were there, they get deleted, because there is simply a replication which unnecessary replications which happens, irrelevant replications which happens. So these intermittent files get deleted. So the right properties are the properties do not have a critical paths. There are no locks on the critical path. It is a sequential disk access. Behaves like a write back cache. Append support without read ahead. Atomicity is guaranteed with key. Always writable, accepts writes even during failure scenario. Right? The failure of Cassandra is very, very less. So I will stop at this for today's class, right? And the remaining things, whatever that we are trying to do, We'll try covering it up in the next class, right? Since tomorrow is 30th April, so we'll meet again in the afternoon, and soon after that you will have to start preparing yourself for the internals.